Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to sit down and do the authors list that I mentioned in my reading goals video. I mentioned that I wanted to do a similar list to what I did in 2022. So if you don't know already what I'm talking about, in 2022 I made a video called 22 in 22, basically a list of authors, mostly authors that I'd read a few books by, or at least one book by, that I really liked something about their writing and I wanted to delve into their body of work and see if I found a kinship with the authors in question. And so I made a list of 22 authors. I'll talk somewhat about how many of those I actually ended up reading in 2022, and also talk about my list for 2023 because I'm doing a similar thing again because I really liked the concept of doing this. The ones I managed to actually read in 2022 was Tove Jansson. I read the very brief non-fiction book where she talks about the building of her house on an island. So it's called Notes from an Island, I think, in the English translation, or Anteckningar från en ö. And that was really lovely, and I listened to it on audio, which was narrated by the woman who plays Tove Jansson in the newish biopic. I got to Deborah Levy from the list. I read her living autobiography in 2021 and really got to love her nonfiction writing, and so one of my goals for 2022 was to read some of her fiction, and I got to Hot Milk, and I enjoyed it. I don't like her fiction as much as her nonfiction, but I still definitely want to delve into her fiction writing. I just don't know exactly when that will be and which titles I will be prioritizing, but I think I will eventually get around to delving deeper into that as well. Another author I had on my list was A. Milne. I read several of his essays in 2022, two essay collections, Year In, Year Out, and By Way of Introduction. Very much enjoyed. And then Shirley Jackson was also on my list. I got to both of her memoirs in 2022, and if you've seen my favorite books of the year video, then you'll know that they were some of my most enjoyable reading of 2022. Another author I had on my list that I wanted to read more from for ages and never got around to was Siri Hustvedt, and I finally read The Blazing World by her during the summer as well, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I have a few of her other books on my shelves as well that I definitely want to eventually get around to. I got to two authors that I hadn't read that was on that list, and one of them was W.G. Sebald. So happy to finally have read something by him. I want to read more by him, but he isn't on my 2023 list just because I'm not sure when I'll be in the mood for his particular type of writing. And then Annie Ernaux was also on that list, and I read I Remain in Darkness right at the end of the year, and it's quite depressing, which, I mean, the title probably suggests that as well. But I'm happy that I got to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the authors on that list. So that's pretty good. I mean, this list is just meant as a sort of priority thing and as something that I can reference back to. It's not something that I'm expecting to actually complete or check off. But I will say that for the list for 2023, I have made it shorter to be able to prioritize as many of them as possible. Let's get into the authors I have for 2023, my list. So a few of them are overlapping with the previous year just because I still feel like they are a priority for me. So first we have Shirley Jackson again. I want to complete her bibliography. So the only novel of hers that I haven't yet read is The Sundial. So I definitely want to get around to that this year. And in terms of of her other writing, I think there's definitely short stories that I haven't read of hers, and there's also Let Me Tell You, which is a combination of various writings she's done for other contexts. So that is something I definitely want to get around to, and I have both of them on my shelves. So those will be my priority when it comes to Shirley Jackson this year. The second author on my list is a male, and again, it is a repeat. The main reason that I put both of these two authors on the list again is that they are two of my favorite authors, and I kind of want to finish off their body of work, and so they are sort of priority for me to really get around to their books. And so with A.A. Milne, I have one of his essay collection, I don't remember what it's called now, but I have one of his essay collections on my shelves, and I want to continue to read his nonfiction and finish that off if possible. I know that there's two of his books that are essays, I think, connected to the Second World War, and if I'm not mistaken, those were very difficult to get a hold of in any price range that I'm willing to pay. So we'll see if the essay collection I have on my shelves at the moment is the last of his nonfiction I read for a while, or if I'm able to track the other things down. Otherwise, I think I will start to dip my toe into his adult fiction, because obviously I've read the Winnie the Pooh books several times. The third author on my list is Cesar Era, and I read one of his novellas several years ago, How I Became a Nun, and I actually didn't rate it very high. I think I rated it 2 out of 5 when I still did star ratings, and the reason I actually even bothered to read anything more by him is that the ending of that book really stuck with me. And so I read On Contemporary Art by him in, I want to say 2021, and really loved it. It is a long form essay that just really stuck with me, even though it's such a brief book. And so Cesar Era has been one of those authors that I really want to get around to reading more of. He has a lot of novellas under his belt, and I do want to get around to those eventually, but the one that I will be prioritizing, I think, with Cesar Era is Birthday, which is one of his nonfiction books. On the fourth place on my list is Magda Szabo, and I have read Abigail, The Door, and Catalan Street by her. 2 of them I've buddy read with Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and we are planning to continue on with our buddy read with Szabo's work in this year, and we have 2 of her books still to read. So we have Isis Ballad that is already out, and then The Fawn that is coming out in English translation later this year, which I'm very much looking forward to. The fifth on my list is Osamu Dazai. I have read all of his novels that have been translated into English. So it is The Setting Sun and No Longer Human, and his novella Schoolgirl. I want to read his short stories, so I have Blue Bamboo on my shelves, and I also want to get the novella that came out last year, and there's also another publication that's coming out later this year by New Directions. I don't remember if it's a collection of short stories or if it is a novel, but it is coming out later this spring, so definitely we'll be picking that one up as well. I really love Osamu Dazai's work, and I also kind of want to reread his books. But yeah, he's definitely on the list. The next one I have is Minae Mizumura. I love the 2 books that I've read by her. One of them is the nonfiction title, The Fall of Language and the Age of English, and the other one is the fiction title, an I-novel. And I want to read Inheritance of Mother, which is probably the one I will be realistically reading this year. I also really want to read a true novel that is a chunker, and it is a retelling of Wuthering Heights in a Japanese context. But it's a very expensive book to get hold of and very difficult in Sweden. So if I can get a hold of it this year, I will definitely be prioritizing it, but if not, I will get around to Inheritance of Mother instead. And also I really want to reread read The Fall of Language and the Age of English, which is one of my favorite nonfiction books. 7th on my list is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he is the author of The Little Prince. I have read The Little Prince many times in different languages as well, and I got around to Wind, Sand and Stars, which is his memoir, in 2020, during pretty early on in the pandemic period, and I found it to be very comforting somehow. There was something about his way of writing, and there is kind of a philosophical lean towards it, and that could put some people off, and me myself included, but there was just something about it that felt very genuine that I really loved, and so I wanted to read more of his nonfiction in particular. And I recently bought Flight to Atlas, which is one of his other memoirs, so that is on my priority, and then I eventually want to read his other fiction as well. So now we're getting into authors I've only read one book by, and so we have Madeleine Bourdeau, who is a Belgian author, I want to say, and I read one of her novels called Marie in maybe 2019. I read it several years ago and really loved it, and it's one of those books that I feel like has completely gone under the radar of, I feel like I don't know anyone who has read it. It is published by Daunt Books, and I've wanted to read more of her books since reading it, and then I just never got around to it, so that is the reason I put her on this list. And I have ordered one of her other novels called La Femme de Guille. She writes a lot of very introspective character studies of women who are quite lonely, and I think there's just something about her character portrayal that I really loved in Marie, and that I'm suspecting I will find in La Femme de Guille as well. 9th on the list is Vladimir Nabokov, and I've read Lolita several years ago again, and I've just been meaning to read more of his books since then. There was just something about, putting aside the actual story of Lolita, there was something about the writing itself that I felt like I kind of connected with, and that got my wheels turning. So I've wanted to read more of his writing ever since, and I have Nin, I don't know how to pronounce it, and which is one of his novels, and I have recently bought Speak Memory, which is his memoir, and I'm particularly interested in the memoir. Again, I'm always particularly interested in the nonfiction of these authors, but yeah, so I have both of those on my shelves and very much looking forward to getting to them. On the 10th on the list is Yukio Mishima. I've read The Temple of the Golden Pavilion. Again, this was a long time ago. I feel like it was one of the first years that I was on BookTube, so it's been a while, and I didn't actually love this book, but I again connected to the writing in some way. And I have several of his books on my shelves, I know, but the one I recently bought I was recently gifted, was Beautiful Star, that was published in the new Penguin edition for Modern Classics. So that is one I will be prioritizing of his. The next one on the list is Olivia Laing, and I'm sure you have heard me ramble on about Olivia Laing's The Lonely City, which I loved, and was one of my favorite books of 2022, so obviously I had to have her on this list. And I have To the River, which is kind of a combination of writing on water and also writing on Virginia Woolf. Very much interested in this dynamic, both the literary and the water element of it. And I basically want to read everything that Olivia Laing has published, but that will be my priority first of all, and then I will probably go to Funny Weather next. We'll see, but I will be prioritizing the one I already own. And then on the 12th on the list is Violette Leduc. I read The Lady with the Little Fox Fur in 2021, I think. don't think it was last year, and it is a novella. It was really tightly written, and so I wanted to read more of her writing in general. And I know that there's a lesbian romance novel that she's published that I don't remember the name of right now, that I've been interested in for a while. And there's also her memoir / autobiographical novel called The Bastard that is coming out in English translation later this year. So I'm really keen to read more of her writing as well. 13th on the list is Jhumpa Lahiri, and I have already started actually with my reading of her. So I read In Other Words, again, a few years ago. I just remember it being the Winter Olympics before the pandemic, so that is when I read it. And I was surprised by how much I connected to it. And so I wanted to read more of her books, but in particular I'm really interested in her relationship with Italian. And so I am currently reading Whereabouts, which is I think it is the first novel she wrote in Italian, and she translated it into English herself. And so I'm reading that at the moment, and I'm also listening to Translating Myself and Others, which is an essay collection by her that is about Italian and language learning and all of that. And so I want to continue on with both of those and continue on with reading her works. But she is one I've already started from this list. And then I have two authors that I've never read, but I think I would like. So we have Stefan Zweig, and I have been interested in his works for a while. I feel like he is that mid-20th century type of era writer that I really get on with. I've been particularly interested in the titles that have been mentioned in reference to being Wes Anderson's inspiration for the Grand Budapest Hotel. And so the one I think I will be starting with is Beware of Pity by him. So yeah, I'm really interested in this author. I think I will start off with his fiction and then move on to the memoir I think he's written for sort of chronicling the Second World War. And then the last name on this list, and also an author that is new to me, is Dasa Drindic. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. I think it is a Croatian author, and the title in particular that I have my eye on is Belladonna, which I actually borrowed from the library a few months ago, or even a year or two ago. I don't even remember when it was. I'd heard about it in some context and picked it up from the library and just read I think 5 pages before I decided that I needed to actually own this copy because I wanted to annotate it. And then I never got around to buying it, and then I've been seeing it on Literary Wanderess Instagram, and I will link her Instagram in the description below. And so it kind of was a reminder that I really wanted to read this book in particular and to read this author. And so that is something I also want to get around to in 2023. Those are all of the authors that I have on my authors to prioritize, authors to read in 2023. Let me know if you've read any of these authors, if you have any recommendations of places to go and books to prioritize for these authors, especially the ones that I haven't read much of. Do let me know. I would be very appreciative of any guiding in terms of that. And also let me know if you have any lists of your own for authors that you really want to get around to this year. I think even if I didn't have like a major list like this, I usually have a few authors in mind in my head, and so I think it's nice to have this as a video and as a constant reference to come back to and see whether I actually end up prioritizing them. So yeah, that was all I wanted to say for today. I hope you're having a fantastic January, hope you're doing well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!